Hi, everybody. Welcome to Casting Calls. Today's guest is Mark Fincannon, who has one of the longest resumes of just about anybody in casting. You have seen him cast shows like The Resident, MacGyver, Nashville, One Tree Hill, Vampire Diaries, Dawson's Creek. It goes on and on and on. Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, it's my pleasure to be here, Lauren. I'm really proud of what you've been doing there in Orlando.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I've been fortunate to work on shows that you cast, and I appreciate that so much. And the Fincannons have such an amazing reputation throughout the Southeast because you guys are extremely giving casting directors. I find it really interesting that you don't do workshops. I've heard that you don't like to charge actors for information. Is that true?
Well, yeah, I mean, actors are generally broke.
True story.
Even when we can get them a job, it's a day here, a day there, maybe a week. It's still, when you add it all together, it's very difficult for an actor to make a living. I think if I wasn't casting and I became an educator, then there might be a situation there where there's value in what you're teaching.
Sure.
We've just always found it difficult to do a workshop on the weekend that an actor's paying us and then go into the office on Monday and cast judgment, or to try and, cast a show and not be biased by the fact that someone took. And even if we weren't biased, there might be a perception out there that, I've got to go to this workshop in order to be really considered by the Fincannon company. And we never really wanted to create that. Now we've done, over the years, we'll go to university settings because universities have funds that they can, pay a stipend to us to come in and then we can teach, but it's not coming out of the, the pocket of the student or actors or whatever.
Yes, I've actually
it's just generally been a corporate kind of approach that we've always had.
That's nice. I've gotten to see you at kind of open panels where you guys have appeared and shared information. You obviously, like you said, you have a ton to offer if at any point you do want to start educating, but I've seen you appear at panels, but not in a workshop format.
Yeah, and we do a lot of that still here in Atlanta. I just didn't want it for SCAD, and we try at least a couple of times a year to go into a setting with other casting directors that gives the actors an opportunity to come into an auditorium setting and maybe have a moderator and just answer questions. And it's really why I'm here with you now, because it is important for us to get the information to the actor that the actor needs, because Lauren, we're really in this together. If I don't have you as an actress working as hard as you are behind the scenes, then I'm struggling to cast the shows that I need to cast. So, and quite honestly, I understand the other side of it because I studied as an actor myself. I got a degree in college in theater, and I went to my very first audition for a television commercial, and it was so terrifying. When I left, I literally walked across the hall. It was in my agent's office in Charlotte. I walked across the hall to her office and I said, "Hey, put tap shoes on my feet and kick me out on the stage. I'll dance all night long, but don't ever ask me to go into that room again." That was the most soulless experience I've ever had. And what I mean by that is when I looked at the camera, it really didn't have a soul.
Right.
And yet I was supposed to speak to it. And so because of that, she recommended that I step behind the camera and work with actors who don't feel the way I feel, who do feel comfortable to be there, who do feel natural to be there. And then I can use my education and my training and my natural gift, I guess, to help actors interpret material, be the other actor if I need to be, to create moments that are authentic, hit the button on the camera, record it, and then present it. And even then, that would have been probably 1980.
Wow.
Yeah, that's forever ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I mean, there's kismet or God's touch on all that. You know, there's no way to explain it in any other way, really.
I totally agree. Sometimes the best things just sort of happen because one thing develops into another. And you said yes, right? You said yes to this opportunity, and that became your life's mission, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So you majored in theater, and then that's what got you into casting as your original agent, which I love. A question for you now, obviously the market has changed so much in the last few years because almost everything is done on tape. How often do you actually see actors in the room anymore?
Well, for television pilots, because you're developing a show that's going to run a season, the writers, the producers, the directors really need to be in the room and play around with the character. Features, because you're playing, ultimately, you have 12 weeks of pre-production. You have plenty of time. You also are going to be presenting a presentation on a very large screen in a very large building in theaters, right? But in television, it's just a much smaller presentation. Therefore, you can get away with more things. And several things happened that forced us into what we're doing now and the way we're doing it now. In 2008, we were doing the series One Tree Hill. We were in season 5 or 6. And every 7 days for years and years, actors drove from Orlando or from Atlanta every week into Wilmington, walked into the room, drove 7 hours in the morning, you know, and then walked into the room, did 3 lines of dialogue, got back in their car and drove back to Atlanta or Orlando. And in 2008, gas went to $4.25 a gallon. Our economy crashed. And basically actors said, we can't come. Well, I still had a show. We still had a show to cast. We still had to find a way to get those actors in front of the directors and writers and producers to do the show.
Right.
And I realized then that they were watching VHS tapes of the guest star actor reels from LA to decide on who the guest stars of each of their episode were going to be. And I thought, wow, if you can cast your guest star off tape, you can cast your supporting characters off tape. Why don't we see if the actors will tape our scenes in their agent's office? And basically we did that because we had no other choice. And at the same time that happened, you know, that went from VHS to mini DV to little DVs to then streaming. And once streaming happened, we got into the next generation of filmmakers who were not used to necessarily doing live auditions. They told all of their stories in a little box, in the phone or in their little computer.
Right.
And they would much prefer to see an audition in that little box and then make a decision as to whether or not that works to their vision or not, as opposed to being in a room for 4 hours, seeing actor after actor, having to stand up from behind the table, go shake their hand. And so several things kind of converged to bring us to where we are today in terms of taping. So there were years there where we spent a lot of time traveling to agents' office, saying, hey, here's the quality that we're looking for. Here's the cool kind of equipment that you need. Here's the kind of lighting we really should have. Here's the best sound that you can deliver. Ultimately, you know, it came down to one day, literally, we were trying to cast a role, and the show was already shooting and all the directors and producers were down on the set. And I remember the day we did this was kind of like, oh boy, there's no going back now. But Spielberg was down on the set, and literally somebody ran down an iPhone to him. It was the early days of even iPhone. And he was able to watch the audition on his iPhone on the set and say, yeah, I'm happy with that actor. From that day forward, you know, it's been a different world in that way. So now professional actors and directors have created professional spaces where actors can come in and they can work and kind of do the way we did in college, you know, do scenes. And basically they have the scenes that our casting office has sent to them, and director and actor has together kind of say, or 2 actors have to say, hey, how can we interpret this scene and put it in front of the camera and present it in such a way that network television is going to sign off on us.
Right.
And that's ultimately what you're doing.
Right.
And so anything that we can do to help you deliver on that level of that quality with performance to the studios, that's what we're all doing together. That's our ultimate goal.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you said that this was born out of necessity really in 2008 because of the economy collapse. I wonder what might be born out of necessity because of today's events. You know, I think about that.
Yeah. You know, I've had several conversations and situations like this on the computer over the last 2 or 3 days, talking about creativity and talking about it's times like this that you become more creative than ever. I mean, we're a type of people that we can easily kind of get in a rut. Yeah. And you're just doing the same thing over and over. But until one day you show up and there's a fence there and you can't walk through that fence.
Yeah.
And then you look up and you go, hey, we got to look around. We're going to have to do this a little differently.
Yeah.
Well, and just the way we are, you know, the human experience is an amazingly creative thing anyway. So now to then add to that, just saying, hey, you're going to have to think differently. You're going to have to discover new things. You're going to have to come up with new solutions. I think you're right. I think we're at a time where we're going to see some fascinating things come out of the season that we're in, as challenging as it is.
I totally agree. It's a time to improvise and adapt, right? So we're all doing that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I mean, nowadays our agents are submitting us for roles. It's funny, you talked about what used to happen. I remember the first time that I ever met you guys was back in probably 2001, 2002. You used to come to Orlando and do open calls, and you would rent a big hotel room. Do you remember this? And we would go in, and I can remember the first time I ever auditioned for you guys was in a hotel suite out somewhere near Disney, and it was for Dawson's Creek or One Tree Hill. It was like an open call, and you would basically take that library of actors back to Wilmington, and then later in the year call them when you felt like there was a role that was right for them.
Yeah, and how we got introduced to Orlando was in 1998, 3 or 4 years earlier, when we spent 9 months of that year down there doing the series From the Earth to the Moon.
Yes, yes.
So we were over at Disney, and we were, you know, for 9 months. I think we put about 327 actors in that series as a total series.
Wow.
And God bless her, Meg Lieberman, the Los Angeles casting director who was over the whole project, just kind of looked at Florida and realized that Florida does had in those days had a nice talent pool, but they would have been through that talent pool within the first 4 or 5 episodes, and they had 12 to do. Sure. So they reached out to us to say, hey, we understand that you could go find the Florida talent, but the beauty is you also know talent in the Carolinas, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Louisiana. And so we're looking to bring in a regional casting director that can literally pull actors from the entire region, because it's going to be a challenge for us all. And that's basically what got us into Orlando, to really love and appreciate that area. And then, you know, Dawson's Creek was going into season 4, probably 4 or 5 then, and we had no idea how long the series would go. We also had gone through an awful lot of actors in the Carolinas and Georgia, and with the same philosophy that Meg had, we were kind of like, well, let's go ahead and tap into the Florida market so that when we have the right roles, we can bring people up for the show, which then played out all through One Tree Hill, which ran for 9 years after Dawson's Creek. So
right. Very successful. Nowadays, when you get submissions on breakdown services, when those agents submit to you and you've got several hundred submissions per role, what makes you select a specific actor? What kind of process do you go through? You know, what makes them jump off the page to you?
Well, I think first of all, after a conversation with the writers, the director, and deciding on the tone of a particular project, I think there is a type in my head for each role that I feel like is what's going to represent the piece. You add that with what I may know of the actors that I'm looking at. If most of them, and I think one of the reasons this transition wasn't difficult for us is because for so many years we were in the room with all these actors. So when they were popping up, we knew them. We knew their work. We knew their range. We knew you know, we knew about them. So to just see a picture wasn't just seeing some random picture. If you were a casting director, you just came into the market and you got 800 submissions. I don't know how you would do it unless you literally pull up the resume of every single one of them, read it completely, pull up the reels of every single one and watch every reel, which would take a long, long time. Yeah. And it can be difficult. And I've actually stepped into rescue shows that brought in an LA casting director who brought in a bunch of actors, but they weren't the most experienced actors, and they didn't really know how to differentiate out of 800 or 900 submissions for one role, which I do get that on a regular basis, believe it or not, in our region. So, but I literally will go through having an idea of what I'm looking for right off the bat, based on what I know of the actor. If it's a new actor that I don't know, let me be very honest. There are certain agencies out there that have been around longer than some of the other ones, and their clients, over time, you begin to realize that certain agents have a certain eye, and they will only represent a certain caliber of talent that fits within their eye.
Right.
And you begin to trust that. And that's just being really honest. And so if we go out to 147 agents, I think, on every project we do. But there are certainly those 10 or 15 or 20 agents that have been in the marketplace for 30 years, 35 years. They really understand talent. They have a real eye for talent. But that also doesn't mean that the agent that just started up last month doesn't also have it. They're just green, like a green actor who just needs a shot, needs an opportunity. So anyway, we'll probably safeguards. We lean toward those agents that we can rely on more. We'll then go look at the demo reel of that particular actor, look at their resume, see if there's, a lot of these roles have special abilities attached to them. Physicality, musicianship, for the show Nashville, for example. So I'm always looking at all those little nuances of a resume, those nuances of of even an interview that you might see in a demo. And basically we cut that 800 down to usually somewhere around 30 or 40 actors that we then ask to audition. Great.
Now, how many do you then select to send on to production usually?
Generally it's around 5. Sometimes it may be less. I'm never going to send 5 if 2 of them I have question marks about, because I don't ever want to send anyone that I wouldn't feel as comfortable as any one of the 5.
Sure.
So there are times that it's 3. There are times where maybe, wow, there's just such a range of types, even within the same role, that have nuances to them that might be interesting, that you really just want the director and the writers to take a look at, to say, wow, I hadn't really thought that way, but certainly the performance is there. It's a little different than I thought. It's a little off color, but it kind of works or whatever. So, but general rule is probably 5.
Okay, great. Now, how long do you watch an audition video before you say, no, moving on, because you know that person's not right?
That's a good question. If they're shorter scenes, we're watching the whole thing. If they're longer scenes, a good 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And then even that, the only reason I would ever stop would be because I know something now that I didn't know when I asked them to read, right? It's not about performance. It's not about, oh, that's just so bad I'm not watching the whole thing. It's really not about that. They are all worthy. And generally, I'll always watch. I mean, it's just like I do see a lot of actors, but not so many actors that I wouldn't give them all a real shot at the effort that they put into the audition. So, I mean, I would generally say 90% of the time I watch them all. There certainly, I would be lying to you if I didn't say that that if I'm watching 30 and I already have 5 or 6 that are stellar, right?
Yeah.
And it's getting late in the day or whatever, And I can just tell in the first 30 seconds, they're just not matching up to what I already have. Then there's no real point in pressing on. And it doesn't mean either. I mean, you know, what happens in a lot of these, Lauren, anymore, it's like, because I've seen their work, even if I've never been in the room with them 2 or 3 times on projects, then I'm always thinking about them for the next project. You know, I may just be saying in this one, hey, this is just not right for this particular project, but I love this actor and I'm going to keep them in mind. And the next time that I have a role like this, you know, they'll be reading again. So if you get asked to read 10 times and you've not been cast, you've been asked to read 10 times because you're doing a good job. It's just not fitting into the, you know, I used to explain it like my grandkids try and put a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to happen. You can try and change it, shape it any way you want. It ain't going in there. So,
you know, that's such a great thing to remember. And actors so often forget that. And I try to tell them that continual being invited over and over and over is your feedback. They're saying, the casting director is saying, I like this person. I just have to find the right fit for them, you know? And so I think
if you're being invited, you're one of the 30 out of the 800.
Exactly. That's already a win, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And also important for actors to remember that we're building a body of work with a casting director a lot of times. If you've never seen me audition, and I audition and you think, oh, she's pretty good. I've got somebody I think that's better for this one, but she's good. I'm going to remember that. Yep. And that happens multiple times, and I'm building a body of work. And so you remember, hey, she's consistently in my top few. So I'm going to remember that. Yeah. So that's good to know. Are there any actor pet peeves that you have, something that you see on tapes and you say, please don't do this?
Yeah, if somebody records the other side and then they're acting to a recording, that'll never go anywhere. The nuances of timing and changing things up, you're never going to grab in that kind of situation. You know, people shouldn't record in their living room or their kitchen or their bedroom or anything like that. It should be a professional, because that's what their competition is doing. Yes. So why would I, you know, mess up the total picture of something presented very professionally with something that's not professional? Even if your performance is really good, you know, we're painting an entire picture here of professionalism, along with, you know, quality performance. Other than that, you know,
but those are important. I mean, technical quality is an important aspect, and sometimes it's frustrating for actors to understand. And I mean, those that are in big cities, Atlanta, Orlando, we have lots of resources for taping companies and I know that there are some actors that are out in, you know, outlying areas that make it difficult.
Or they may be on a shoot somewhere.
They may be on traveling,
trailer. So in those situations, you really must avoid the actor that's reading with you being close to the camera, and now their voice is really loud and the actor you can barely hear. It needs to be the other way around.
Right.
So get a lavalier mic, get a cable mic, do whatever you got to do to mic the actors so you have really crisp and as good an audio quality as you possibly can. Audio is a huge thing. I think that's the biggest challenge that even young filmmakers have, short filmmakers, is sound. I mean, sound is such a crucial part of the total delivery, you know?
Yeah, sound and lighting. I never realized that either were so difficult until years ago when I started watching a lot of student films, you know, with actors, and I go, wow, sound is hard.
Yeah,
clearly.
Very hard. Yeah. You know, in lighting wise, I think another thought that comes to my mind is I would always recommend that the camera lens be at the level of your nose. Because if you're looking up, it creates a different experience. If you're looking down, it creates a different experience. So if you're sitting, drop the camera down to nose level. If you're standing, raise the camera to nose level.
That's
great. The camera should be at nose level. And we generally prefer not even a medium shot. We prefer more of a close-up, so that we can really see what's happening inside your person through your eyes, the soul, what's happening there in the heart, right? Because for me, I was driving in to do one of these showcases last year, and I knew the question was going to come up, and it probably would come up with you eventually, but I'll go ahead and ask it. You know, what is it that you see that makes someone stand out? You know, and just on my way in, I realized, and it's particularly been this way in our part of the world, because when I started in this 40 years ago, they weren't necessarily making films and television on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. All of the actors that I was finding, including myself, came out of the theater.
Right.
Well, the theater training is for a performance on a stage to 50 rows away. Mm-hmm. Heightened makeup, you know, and literally you trained to perform. Mm-hmm. And there's 3 acting tips that I can't take credit for it. I just heard it from an actress friend of mine last year. I wrote them down, thought these 3 have to be passed on for the rest of time. One is, acting is not a performance, it's a transformance. Mm. So you step into a moment and you do everything you can to create an environment to where that moment has its own transformative moment. It's an experience. I don't know what you're going to say. You don't know what I'm going to say. I'm waiting to hear what you say, and then I'm allowing that response to impact me, and then I'm responding based on how it impacts me.
Yes.
Which leads me to where I was just saying, I think the heart has to be involved in every performance, mm-hmm. because the heart is a real aspect of the human experience. We're either hurt, it's either wounded, or it's feels good, or it's abused, or it's whatever, but it affects the heart. Mm-hmm. And if it's just the head, then it's just going to be a performance. It's not going to be open for a transformance to happen, right?
Right.
So, you know, you can do all the work you want to prep, but then you've got to be willing and ready to bring your heart fully to the space and allow yourself to feel. And we will see what you feel. You don't have to emote that or perform that or act that. It will, if it's not happening, it's not happening. Yeah. And you can be frustrated as an actor saying, hey, it ain't happening, right? So you got to say, well, then what do we got to do to make it happen, right? And that's why improv is such a healthy exercise, because you're having to be focused and you're having to really, really listen, because listening is a crucial aspect of great work.
Yeah, acting is reacting.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you that, you know, I always say theater is about acting and film is about feeling.
Yeah.
But the key is that, yeah, you don't have to show us. Just show up. If you think it, we'll see it. And so you don't have to show us, right?
Yeah. My wife and I just watched Terrence Malick's latest film. If you haven't seen it, you got something to look forward to.
Really? Is it great?
Yeah, it's called A Hidden Life.
Oh, I'll write that down.
And it's a true story. But I would say it's probably one of the greatest examples about what we're talking about right now, because Matlock has a way. Well, first of all, his approach is every single shot is a story. Mm-hmm. Just imagery. Mm-hmm. But then when you encounter the people in the story, rarely do they speak. Mm-hmm. You live all their experiences through what they're feeling. Mm. And it's amazing. It really is. I think it's a masterpiece. I don't know why it didn't, you know, kind of find its way to Academy Awards, because it's on that level. I think it's subject matter. I think it's timing. It's just, you know, nuances of culture. Keep stories from finding their way, and, you know, and sometimes launch stories that shouldn't find their way. Right.
Right.
But anyway, and let me give you the other 2 tips before I forget them. The other one is acting is not a proving ground. It's a playground.
Love that.
Yeah. You don't have anything to prove. You got a gift, and that's you. and someone else has a gift, and that's them, and they come into the room, and these two gifts, it's two kids meeting at the park.
Yeah.
Playing in the sandbox, swinging the swing.
Yeah.
Having fun together, and then and feeding off of one another, and being aware of one another, and saying, hey, let's try this, let's try that. Oh, let's go over here and do that. Let's do this.
Right. And getting our ego out of the way so that we can show up and bring that childlike quality of public solitude, where we're not afraid of what everybody thinks and trying to please everyone. We're just being.
Yeah. And giving. I mean, that really is, that's the last one for me, is ultimate. But the third one is be more interested than interesting.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I have to work on this. Yeah. I have to work on this a lot, because I just have had so many stories in my life, and I get interviewed so often that I find myself just, sounding like I want you to know how interesting I am, but it's not about me at all. It's really interesting, these experiences that I've had, that I've had the experience to live out. But so genuinely, I do have to every day kind of remind myself of that one and say, hey, what's more important today when I meet Lauren is how's Lauren, and what's happening with Lauren, and how can I serve Lauren? And really, that's the way an actor should approach the other actor in every situation they step into. I've said over and over, go make the other actor the best actor that they've ever been by what you give them. Mm-hmm. And if you are giving them that much, they're going to give you that much back. But more importantly, the camera is going to be watching you. And when all the footage shows up in the editor's room, you can ask your husband. Mm-hmm. He's going to be cutting throughout to that person so engaged, so giving, so in the moment, that he's not going to spend a lot of time on the talking head. He's going to hear the person start talking. Then he's cutting to the person that's invested, that's sitting there listening and engaged. And because any film that we really watch, we've probably not observed ourselves closely enough to realize that we watch story through the reactions of the people facing situations and circumstances. Not the situation or the circumstances, but how the person reacts to it. Because we are saying to ourselves, wow, would I react that way? Or would I react differently? Or get the heck out, out of here, go do something about it, or whatever, Anyway, just if you go to prove, oh, just wait till you hear my line, or wait till you see how subtle I am, or wait till you see how amazing I am, then that's going to show up. That's going to show too. And the editor's going to cut around you. I mean, that's the way it is.
I completely agree. Yeah. And that's such a great perspective. And I love the way that you're phrasing it. I think that's going to make sense to a lot of people.
Well, I hope so.
If you were going to sit down as an audience member and watch any of the shows that you've cast or any of the movies that you've cast, what are some that you would choose that you just particularly like?
Oh, well, if people knew the story behind Into the Spear, it really was a career film, because I went to the jungles of Panama, got in a canoe, went up into the rainforest, found indigenous people. Yeah. And then created a school and taught these people who'd never seen a movie, much less be in one, cast 27 roles out of natives.
What? When was this?
16 years ago.
Wow.
And it's based on a true story. It's called Into the Spear. Another one that really comes to mind is a film I did that Barbra Streisand actually directed and starred in, called The Prince of Tides. And it was challenging because it involved kids. At the end of the day, there were 15 kids that we cast, because it starred Nick Nolte and Melinda Dillon. And then they were brother and sister, and they had another brother in the story, but he died young. But the movie was flashbacks of them growing up together. Mm-hmm. So we had to find a young Nick at 6, at 11, and 16. Mm-hmm. And they all needed to look like Nick, and they all needed to look like each other. Then we had to find Melinda Dillon at those same ages because they were twins. Then because they had an older brother, we had to find the older brother at 8 and 12 and 16, and they all three needed to look like one another, and they needed to look like the photograph that they had of their brother before he died. And then Nick Nolte is married at the beginning of the show and is a football coach in Charleston, South Carolina, and he had 3 little daughters, and they were just beautiful and wonderful and filled with life. So by the time you had those 9 and then those 3, that's 12 kids starring in a film that Barbra Streisand is directing. And that's happening in the South. I mean, that's happening in Charleston or outside of Charleston, South Carolina. So we did open calls in Columbia and in Charlotte and in Orlando and in Charleston. And we basically found these kids out of open calls.
Wow.
And if you've ever seen the film, tragically, one of the scenes with those kids involves a rape. 2, bad guys breaking into the home in the middle of the night and raping the young girl and the young boy. And so it was not just a little candy coated material. It was material we really had to really be very careful about how we approach these children and process them and talk them through it. And of course, none of that was graphic. It was all implied, but even in that, the kids needed to understand. And anyway, and I'm so proud of that film because there are a lot of moments where we cut immediately from Nick to him at 12. And we're seeing him looking up at his mom and talking to his mom. And it just so works that, that's when it comes to mind. Ray comes to mind because the woman who played Ray's mother, who opened the movie, she's at the clothesline, and she's the one that when he would flash back and he's blind crawling on the floor and she's holding herself back from trying to help him, that woman crashed our audition. She wasn't even supposed to. And really? It's a long story that I won't bore y'all with now, but it was a divine, I look on my whole career and there are just so many divine stories that you can only say, but God, really. And what we ultimately found out, just to shorten the whole story, is that this girl was down at Kinko's. We found this out a year later. She was at Kinko's halfway down the block, and this beautiful African-American woman who was the resident manager of the hotel where we were having the auditions, who I met when I checked in the day before. And she said, "Oh, I know Jamie Foxx is coming and y'all going to be doing Ray Charles' story." I said, "Yeah." And so we had just an encounter. Well, the next day she saw this actress at Kinko's and she walked up to the actress feeling inspired and asked the actress, "Are you an actress?" And she said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm running off headshots." And she said, "Well, you have an audition on the 2nd floor of the hotel halfway up the block."
Wow.
So she went, and my wife was checking actors in, and she had never done that before. And of course, this girl's name was not on the list, and she's all freaked out because, she didn't know what to do and she didn't know whether to tell me. Yeah. But she's a praying, amazing woman, and she just felt something in her, just her inner spirit that said, "There's this woman special. I can't let her go." And as it turns out, she was exactly right. And in a sense, I kind of felt that too when I met her, to the point that the very next morning I told the director, I said, "I think I met Ray Charles' mother yesterday." And I said it before I had a chance to go, "Wait a minute, what am I saying?"
Right.
This could go on and I could bring her in next week and work with her and all that, but I didn't. And because I said it, the director said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, this lady crashed the audition yesterday and I only had 30 seconds with her, but she was thin and gaunt and looked a little sickly, but she had a power that that sounds like what you're describing Ray's mother was like." And he said, "Well, let me, I'm going down to grab some lunch. Why don't you see if she can swing by? We can just at least say hey before I head back." Well, that's what happened. She came over and I decided, well, I'm going to run off a scene or two and give it to her. And she had never auditioned before, not for a film. She was actually in a show at the Alliance, and that's why she was at the Kinko's. And she came in, and I don't know how to describe it other than when the director left, he said, hey, well, we got a lot of time between now and the show, and we'll figure it out. We'll talk about it more. And he got in his car and headed to the airport. And because it was such a phenomenal encounter, I called the LA casting director to say, hey, I'm sending you a tape of this girl that came in. She said, you don't have to say anything else. I said, what? She said, director's already called me, and now he knows how he's opening the film.
Wow. It was just meant to be. It was her role.
It was meant to be. There's no other way to describe it. Yeah. And she went on and was unbelievable and almost got an Academy Award nomination. But then because she's just such a sensitive artist, like many are, just handling the pressure. I don't think she ever really had the support from her father. He was a military, career military officer, and just thought acting in this whole world was not something that he felt like was best for his daughter. So I think she lived out under a lot of, she didn't have the blessing of the father in a sense. And even though we tried to help her going forward, she never really did anything else after that. It's crazy. You just don't know these journeys. You just don't know.
Yeah, man, that's too bad. And I'm sure I meet so many actors along my journey that have not that story, but stories about, someone in their life discouraging them from doing this thing. Yeah. And I think it's amazing because one of the things that we can all say, especially from this recent experience of what's going on in the world, is that no job is secure necessarily. I mean, our job is to follow our passion, to do the best job that we can do at what talents we were blessed with every day.
Yeah.
And so it's hard though that some people don't see that. We see it all the time in our industry that people's lives are, limited because someone told them they couldn't do this thing that they love so much.
Yeah, I think that it probably happens in a lot of different professions, but this one in particular, just because there's nothing secure about it.
Right.
Really, because you can be on a television series for 4 years and that series ends and you can never get on another series again. You may not get booked again. I'm sure there's a line. It'd be interesting. You could do a documentary and probably go back, and if you had a way to click in the database and see these actors that were top of the world, and then
like one hit wonder.
To go do something different. Yeah, something totally different.
Yeah,
and people just forgot about them because they weren't on TV every night.
Right.
Out of sight, out of mind. Right.
It certainly happens to a lot of child actors that peak at 11. Please there. Yeah, that's a hard thing. So, and that actually leads me to my last question, and that is, if you weren't in this if you were in a parallel universe, what job would you have if it weren't in casting? What would you love to do?
Well, that's a good question. Probably be a PGA professional.
Do you love golf that much?
I do love golf, yeah. And if I could really play well and be literally in contention on Sunday walking down Augusta, that would be, for me, that would really be, and not because I might win $1 million, not because I might get some trophy, but just the experience itself, that would be exhilarating and would be fun. I mean, that would be one of those, kind of like our industry. I've always kind of pinched myself and said, you mean people pay me to do this, right? I think that's the way golfers feel sometimes, even though it's easy from the outside to look in and say, look how cool that is. But the fact is, they're gone 9 months out of the year from their family. They're practicing on Monday and Tuesday. They're doing a pre-round on Wednesday, and then they're playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then they're on a plane Monday morning next to so it's 9 months. So there's a sacrifice. It's all professional sports. But I think that's what I'm finding right now as fascinating about what we're going through, is because there are so many people that have idolized sports for so long, for it now to simply be gone.
Yeah.
It really causes those individuals to, I hope, in a way. I mean, even me, because I enjoy sports, I can't say I idolize them. So if they went away forever, I could honestly tell you that's not that big a deal, but
Right.
that's an unbelievable deal to an awful lot of people, right?
Sure.
And certainly, you know, those careers of all those athletes that are involved in that, many of them have spent their entire lives. My youngest daughter wrote a beautiful Facebook note this morning, just reflecting early this morning on all of the different people and the challenges that they're facing. And she listed like 15, and I'm sure there's 115 or 315. But, you know, several of them were, you know, people whose, shoot, I don't have it in front of me, but it was, you know, just, golly, now I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought in terms of what hit my mind.
That's okay.
But it was really just losing your career and not really, and really you're
mm-hmm.
just the provision that you have for your family or for your, you know, whatever is gone. You know, the health workers, I mean, she went down a whole list of just amazing, it was perception. I was amazed by her perception and her sensitivity to be able to just come up with all these lists of all these different people groups, and what the challenges they're facing today. You know, our company went from 7 shows to none in 48 hours. Yeah. And I don't see work coming to our office before, being really honest, I don't see any work coming before end of June, because I just think our industry is just not going to gear up that fast. Mm-hmm. I'm sure writers are writing like crazy right now, I would imagine. Sure. But just to gear up and get pre-production going, and in your network television space, they don't usually start shooting till mid-June, late June anyway. Mm-hmm. So they'll just wait till the next season. They're not like they're going to start up in May or June. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So, you know, prayers for our associates, and because, you know, we're going to obviously help them any way that we possibly can, the same way most employers, I hope, across the country are doing. But it's, yeah, we're definitely all going to have to just figure out a way to be more creative as we started talking about this.
I know it's weird because, you know, I don't want anyone to suffer. And I think about, I'm so grateful for the fact that, you know, we have a roof over our heads and food on the table and all those things that I know some people are worried about right now. My husband and I went from same thing. I mean, I had 7 classes a week and 60 tapings plus shoots on the book to nothing in 24 hours, you know, but there's this weird comfort in going, well, we are not alone, you know, there's the entire globe is experiencing this right now. And it really is a small world. And there's comfort in knowing that other people, not that other people are suffering, but comfort in knowing that other people are also going to have to figure out ways to come out of this, you know?
And we can use our new creativity to help those people that don't, you know, that need the help.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been talking to a lot of actors and talking about the fact that eventually we'll come out of this. We will. Mm-hmm. And entertainment is what people will look to comfort
That's true.
them. You know, the entertainers are called upon after times of crisis. And so I know that we will be needed. And so it's important for us to keep our skills sharp and our muscles warm while we're going through this, keep our creativity up so that when we're called upon, we're ready.
Absolutely. And one great blessing that came out of this is my opportunity to sit here and have a conversation with you today, Lauren.
Thank you. That's exactly how I feel. The silver lining is that I have had the time to sit down with amazing people like you, and I would never normally have the chance to do that. So I cannot thank you enough for all the information that you provided, Mark. You're such a bright light for the actors. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to do it. And again, I'm very proud of you and look forward to what creatively we can do going forward.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you.